Councillor Coleman-Cook.
Here, Chair.
Councillor Hart.
Here, Chair.
Councillor Wright.
Here, Chair.
Councillor Garner.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Scott. Not at the moment. Councillor Keane.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Moore, Pat Moore. Not at the moment. And obviously, I'm here, which...
Hello, mate. Jill Bayford. I've just joined. Sorry, I'm a late. I had problems getting in.
Thank you, Jill. That's no problem at all. We were aware from Nick Hughes that you had technical issues. Also joining us is Estelle, our legal officer, Emily, Democratic Services, and Mr. Livingston, Ian Livingston, and Emma, have you been somewhere? So that, yes, we're all on. We should be all here now. Okay, we're getting used to this, I think. If you have any difficulties this afternoon during the meeting, please contact Democratic Services or call. And the number today, it is Charlotte, who is on 577193. Her number will be included at the top of the chat stream for your convenience. I would ask participants, when you are not speaking, please mute your microphone to minimise any background noise while we're going through our proceedings. Microphones must only be on if the participant has been granted permission to speak. To gain permission to speak, please very briefly indicate on the chat on the right-hand side of your screen. And I will then make a note and go back to you once the person speaking has finished. Would everyone present please make sure that mobile phones are turned to silent and they must not make calls or take calls during this meeting. Please also refrain from checking emails or conducting any other business and ensure that you are in a quiet room free from distractions for the duration of this meeting. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. And following the meeting, the recording will be available on the Council's YouTube channel. Members wishing to speak under Council Procedure 21. Is there any member we have with us this afternoon who wishes to speak under 20.1? We don't, thank you. Public speaking. The following applications have been reserved for public speaking. Please, members, take note that agenda item 4E, D05. We have 2 members of public speaking on that item. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Dennis, substituted by Councillor Rozeski. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? Thank you. Agenda item 3, minutes of the Planning Committee. Item 3A, minutes of the Planning Committee on the 20th of May 2020. Do I have a proposer, and if you're happy with them?
I propose, Chair.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Do you all agree?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Agenda item 3B, minutes of the planning meeting on the 3rd of June. Do members agree that these minutes of the committee, which was held on the 3rd of June, are all correct? Do I have a proposer, please?
Proposed, Chair.
Seconded.
Thank you. Do you all agree?
Agreed.
No abstentions? No. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, the schedule of planning applications and public speaking. Any site visits will take place when, and it is possible, when Mr. Livingston has gone through this afternoon. If anybody wasn't here, it stays the same. Again, if possible, if there are any site visits, Democratic Services will let us know how we go about it. I'm moving forward to planning applications, bringing up the agenda, item 4E, which is the planning application for deferral of the Orb Inn, 243 Ramsgate Road, Margate. I have statements to be read out, and Estelle is going to do that kindly for us. And the first speaking is from a Mr. Blithen. I hope that is spelled, or I've stated that correct, who's raising points of concern. Estelle.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a statement. Good afternoon, members. The application looks to make productive use of a previously developed site within the urban area to make a meaningful contribution towards the supply and delivery of much-needed local housing. The applicants have also developed the adjacent site. Here, 9 of the 14 units are occupied by NHS key workers, being ideally located for the hospital. It is anticipated that this development would serve a similar function, with interest already received from other key workers keen to secure accommodation in the area. Objections received to date on heritage grounds are all noted and fully understood. It is recognised that the former public house use and original building are historic, and as such, it is quite right that the application should consider any heritage impacts. It is for this reason that the applicant commissioned a detailed historic review of the site to inform the design and consideration of the application, which has been carried out by Canterbury Archaeological Trust. Whilst the sentiment of the objections is understandable, the facts and evidence reveal a building which has been extensively altered over time, to the extent that very little original fabric or features remain. As the Council's own Conservation Officer concludes, having visited and inspected the site in person, and this is in quotation marks, unfortunately, little to none remains of its character internally, with the main somewhat original but largely replaced and repaired with the main somewhat original but largely replaced and repaired front facade, resulting in a feature common and perhaps better portrayed elsewhere in Margate. Close inverted commas. The proposed design will utilise and incorporate the original fabric of interest within the new buildings. As shown by the Conservation Officer's assessment, a visit and inspection of the site clearly reveals the building's compromised condition and illustrates the inherent limitations that would prevent any feasible conversion given its condition, levels within the building and configuration. This is notwithstanding the economic realities of this and the fact that the building's position and orientation on site limit any reasonable opportunity to build additional units alongside the existing building. Whilst unfortunate, the only viable and feasible option for the site is redevelopment. It is overwhelmingly evident from the financial accounts and string of landlords who have been unable to make the business profitable, despite past investment, that ongoing use as a public house is unviable. This was the case even before the current COVID-19 restrictions and difficulties this presents going forward. Despite marketing, no alternative pub or other commercial user was identified for the site. Without a viable and deliverable redevelopment scheme, the sad reality is that the site would inevitably continue to remain vacant and fall further into disrepair. Indeed, it is noted that commenting online on a recent press article regarding the application, a former landlord of the Orb confirmed that the building needed, open inverted commas, serious investment, which simply is not worth it, and that it is sad to see it go, but it would only sit there rotting if left, close inverted commas. The applicant has worked closely with officers to develop the design, which is appropriate for the site context, preserves neighbouring amenity, and delivers appropriate levels of parking and open space for residents. It is therefore hoped that members will support the positive officer recommendation and secure an active and beneficial use for the site.
Thank you, Estelle. Another letter has been received, and I will ask Estelle to read that out. It's from Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. Margate Civic Society's objections to this proposal are extensive and fully documented within the case officer's report. The Society still considers that the destruction of this well-respected local landmark should be resisted at all costs. The Orb is of considerable architectural merit and has stood on this site in its current form for almost 200 years. The report by the Canterbury Archaeological Trust, submitted by the applicant, even commends the building as being of local historic interest. It is precisely for this reason that the building should be retained. The Society has no objection to the building being converted and even appropriately extended to provide residential accommodation. Although the building does not enjoy listed status, this should not affect the desire to retain something of architectural merit. Margate Civic Society does therefore urge the Planning Committee to think very carefully before agreeing to the loss of this well-loved local landmark. We only get one chance to save and preserve our local heritage, and here is an opportunity at this committee meeting to do just that. We do therefore most respectfully urge the committee to refuse this application and grant this building the opportunity for preservation rather than destruction. The Orb cannot plead its own case, so on behalf of the Orb, Margate Civic Society urges the committee to refuse this application and grant this lovely old building the opportunity to continue gracing the local landscape.
Thank you very much, Estelle. I will now ask the officer to give her report, please. Thank you, Emma. I think we've lost Emma for a moment.
Sorry, can you see my
Yes,
screen?
Emma. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chairman. So the application site is outlined in red here. So it fronts onto Ramsgate Road. You can see the existing building towards the centre of the site. To the left are neighbouring properties that front onto Farley Road, and then to the right-hand side you can see Nash Lane. This is an aerial view of the application site. So the application site is located fronting the fields, so fronting Ramsgate Road opposite the fields on the right-hand side of the screen. And here is the application site here. So you can see there's a hard surface area to the front of it, and then the building behind it, with neighbouring properties over to the left. On the right-hand side, you can see in this view is the former petrol station, which was on the adjacent site, but this site's recently been developed for housing. This is a view taken from the other side of Ramsgate Road looking towards it. So you can see the front elevation of the Orb building towards the centre of the site. And then this is a photo taken in Ramsgate Road looking towards the application site. So you can see the Orb building facing us on the right-hand side with the parking area over to the left and the neighbouring properties in Farley Road in the distance. And then this is inside the application site. So this is the forecourt area to the front of the Orb. And again, the neighbouring properties in the distance. And then this is the side elevation of the Orb building. So this is the elevation that fronts Ramsgate Road. This is the front elevation of the building. Then this is looking again to the front elevation, but the side extension to the front of the side. So to the side of the front elevation, and then this is the rear of the bit of the site with the existing trees along the boundary. And then this is to the rear of the Orb. So this is the rear elevation, and you can see the extensions that have taken place to the rear of the property. And then again, this is the rear yard area, and you can see the neighbouring properties in the distance. This again is the forecourt looking towards the neighbours. And then again, a closer shot of the neighbours, and you can see the existing boundary wall that runs between the site. And then this is taken from Ramsgate Road looking towards the neighbouring, the adjacent development where the former petrol station was. You can see the fact that a 2 to 3 story development has been recently constructed on this site, with also development to the rear of it. And then this is looking inside, taken from the orb, looking towards the neighbouring development site. So again, you can just see the development next door. So the applicant is the same developer for this this development. And then again, you can see the proximity of the new development to the orb. So this is the existing front elevation. So the main issues to be considered through this application is that the demolition of the building, the loss of the community facility, and the impact on the character appearance of the area from the new development. So this is the existing front elevation, and then again going back to the existing the photo of the front elevation. So the heritage statement's been submitted with the application. The building's not listed; it doesn't fall within the conservation area, but the main consideration is whether it's considered to be a non-designated heritage asset. So the heritage statement submitted with the application has given some merit to this front elevation. However, you can see that the porch area at the front is an addition to the existing elevation. So this is an addition along with a side extension as well. So the building has been altered to the front elevation. You'll see from the Conservation Officer's comments as well that whilst the front elevation is considered to be of some significance, it's not particularly unique, and it's a design that's quite common within Thanet to see a building of this design with bay sliding sash windows. Then this is the side elevation that looks onto Ramsgate Road, the existing side, and again the view of it. So this is considered to be the most significant elevation of the building. So you can see the fact that there's a lot of flint work and old brickwork within this elevation, and you can see old advertising material on the side elevation. At low level, you can see the flint brick wall, which was an old boundary wall that ran along the edge of the site. So within the heritage statement, this wall was considered to be the most significant element and the oldest element of the building, and so that some weight is given to this significance of this elevation. Then moving round to the rear elevation and to the existing side elevation. This was a photo showing this. So again, you can see the side elevation of the rear section on the right hand side, but again you can see that the building has been significantly altered. There's plastic cladding within dormers and single story side extensions that have been added to the property. So from this view, the level of significance significantly drops and is not considered to contribute to the significance of the building. And then this is looking at the existing floor plans. So part of when looking at the significance of the building, it's partly to do with the building itself, but also the social history of the building. So the property has been on the site in this condition for at least 200 years. So there's obviously some local significance for residents in terms of the fact there has been a public house on this site and the way in which this has developed over time. Now, when looking at the actual building and the fact it is a community facility as a public house, we have had information submitted looking at the viability of the continued use of the building as a public house. The building has been marketed for at least 7 months at a reasonable price for the community facility. And whilst there's been, over time, there's been a number of different landlords and the building has been significantly refurbished prior to the more recent marketing, and still it's not considered that the public house has been viable. Trade has reduced from the evidence submitted, and that's the reason for which the property has been marketed. And over those 7 months, there's been no interest from someone taking it on as a public house or for any other community facility. So you can see from the floor plans that it's not a significantly large space at ground floor level. It's broken up with different rooms. The rear section of the site is on different levels. So you can see that there's steps that go from the front to the rear. So there's a basement area and then a mid-ground between ground and first floor level. So the rear section is on a different level to the front section. The front section is also broken up with different internal walls, and there's the black area that you can see on the right hand side is a fireplace. So this breaks up that space as well, with the right hand side being separated off from the main space. So it's quite an awkward shape to be able to to reuse as an alt is not particularly flexible because of these different spaces and on different levels. And then this is just showing the first floor elevation as it is. So at the moment, there's residential accommodation at first floor level above the public house in the form of a 2-bed flat. So in terms of the proposal, in terms of looking at the significance, the fact that there has been a public house on the site for a long time does add local significance to the property. However, as that information that's been provided, it shows that it's not particularly viable to continue the use as a public house, and therefore that significance as a public house will be lost through the fact that the building can no longer continue as that use. So alternative development has therefore been proposed as part of this application. The proposal was for the erection of 2 3-storey buildings which contain 10 2-bed flats, 2 1-bed flats and 2 3-bed masonettes. So you can see within the site there's block A, which is on the left, and block B, which is on the right. And you can see that there's a vehicular access that's been provided over on the left-hand side, which is a new access onto Ramsgate Road, which will access the parking spaces. So in terms of the design, the proposal is looking at this 3-storey building, which is mainly 2 stories, but with accommodation within the roof space. Again, when looking at the significance of the existing building with the side elevation, one of the comment that was made by the conservation officer is that because only a very small element of the building is considered to be of significance, mainly being that side elevation, it's not considered it's enough to make it worthy to retain the building as a whole. However, the reuse of that wall or materials from that wall into the proposed development could help to integrate this into the area and records of the history of the site. So you can see from this front elevation that towards the centre of the bays, reclaimed flint work is proposed to be used, which will be from that side elevation. So in terms of the design, it's quite traditional with 2-storey bays within these gable projections on either side, and then dormers within the roof space. It will be using brick, the reclaimed flint work and cladding, along with black slate roof. This is the side elevations of block A, so the block on the left. So you can see on the left-hand side is the elevation facing the neighbouring properties, and on the right-hand side is facing the other block. And you can see that the rear section drops down in height, which reduces the scale of the development. And then this is the rear elevation of the proposal with, again, you can see the rear section dropped down, so the scale of the development reduced. And then there's the floor plans of the proposal. And again, so this is showing the 3-bed flat within the roof space. So all of the units meet the national space standards. So now looking onto block B on the right, it's a very similar design. Again, you can see the 2 projecting bays, and again the reuse of the reclaimed flint work, and again the side elevations. So the elevation on the right is facing the adjacent development that's recently been constructed. And then again, the rear elevation and the floor plans. So in terms of how it sits within the street, you can see it on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the adjacent development, which was 3-storey in height. But you can also see that looking at the ground level, the adjacent development is on a lower ground level than the proposed development. And the proposed development is adjacent to 2-storey houses in Farley Road. So in terms of looking at the height of it, the eaves level seeks to follow the eaves level of the properties in Farley Road, with just accommodation within the roof space. You can see there's large spaces between the side elevation of block A and the neighbouring property, and between the development and to the right-hand side as well. So it's considered that it sits well in terms of the pattern of development and spacing between the development. Again, it's just sections showing through the development. So the application has been amended during its submission to provide the rear section dropped down in order to reduce the overall scale of the development. It's 22 metres deep, so it was considered that a reduction in the rear was needed in order for the rear to appear subordinate to the main front section. So this shows the drop in level. So the rear section is 1.5 metres lower than the front section. And again, this is another section through, and then this is taken at the rear of the site. So these are the rear lowered sections. So you can see how the ground level of the lower sections relate to the neighbouring ground level. So on the left is the neighbouring rear gardens, and you can see how that's dropped. In terms of looking at the impact on the neighbours, there's a distance of 19 metres from the side elevation of Block A to the rear elevation of the nearest neighbour. So that would not normally be considered an acceptable distance for overlooking. So through in the application again, if you can see here, the neighbouring properties appear quite close. They've got quite shallow gardens, and they would be overlooked from any clear glazed side windows. So through the application, again, the side elevation has been amended. So this is the elevation facing those neighbours. In the front section, an oriel window is proposed where the window would look onto the road, along with a high level window. And then the windows in the rear section at first floor level would all be obscure glazed and fixed shut, along with the dormer windows as well, in order to prevent any overlooking on those neighbours. So in terms of outlook and light, you can see there's a significant distance to any of the neighbours to prevent any impact on light and outlook. And in terms of the impact on the adjacent development, there's a significant distance with no direct overlooking, and there's no side windows in the neighbouring development, so there wouldn't be any window-to-window overlooking between them. To the rear of the site, the properties in Farley Road have very deep gardens, so any rear windows within the development would be facing the far end of the neighbouring gardens. So again, there's no direct overlooking of their private amenity space. In terms of looking at the highway impact, as mentioned before, the existing access is being made redundant and being moved back to a footpath, and a new access being created to the left-hand side of the site with adequate visibility displays. Highways have raised no objections to the proposal. 16 parking spaces are being proposed, including 2 visitor parking spaces, allowing for 1 space per unit plus the visitor parking spaces, and that this would include some electric vehicle charging spaces as well. In terms of the landscaping, as you saw from the photos, there's some mature trees along the rear boundary of the site. All of the mature trees within the site are to be retained, and you can see these retained through this floor plan. So the areas outlined in green are the retained trees. There's a few trees that are to be removed. You can see them outlined in red, and these are much smaller trees within the site that don't offer as much amenity value, and therefore the loss of these trees is not considered to be of concern. But the retention of the larger trees is certainly supported through the scheme. The proposal also includes additional planting, as you can see in the corners of the site, with new trees, and there's a large grass area to the rear and side, which would provide the amenity space for the units, and would also link in with the neighbouring development. So there wouldn't be any boundary treatment between the two, but there would be actual shared amenity space between the 2 sites. For the occupiers of the development, there'd be refuge storage towards the front of the site. So to the front, outlined in green on this plan, is the refuge storage area, and the cycle storage area is outlined in purple, and that would be located to the rear. So it's a balanced application. Obviously, there are quite a few concerns regarding the loss of the existing building, including those from the civic society and a number of residents. As mentioned, the main significance of the building is considered to be the elevation that fronts the road. Sorry, I'll just skip back to the photos again. So sorry, that elevation. So this elevation is considered to be of the most significant of the entire building. But I visited the site with the conservation area. We've looked inside. There's nothing of any value within the building itself. So it's not worthy of being listed, especially given the number of alterations that have been made to the building. So whilst there's local significance from the social history of a building on the site, the fact that it's not viable to continue as a public house is a relevant point, because this use can't continue any longer. So overall, whilst it is accepted that it is a non-designated heritage asset and the scale of the loss will be significant through its demolition, the significance of the building is limited to just this one elevation, and therefore when considering this against the benefits of the housing scheme, which will be on a windfall site and will therefore contribute to the council's housing need. The benefits from this housing development are considered to outweigh the harm from the loss of this building, and therefore it's considered to be acceptable. In terms of the heads of terms, a number of contributions are proposed to the development, which the agent has agreed to, and you can see within the report these set out to the rear of the report, end of the report. So we're just waiting for the legal agreement to be submitted to secure these, and subject to the submission of this, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. I move that the officer's recommendation for deferral. Second.
Second.
Thank you. I'm not sure who did that, but no Councillor Coleman Cook. Anyway, is that Councillor Brzeski? Okay, thank you very much. Members, I open it to you. First on my list, if I don't come back to you on the side panel, I am making notes of those who wish to speak, so you're not being ignored. Thank you. Councillor Orban.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I called this application in what seems like a lifetime ago now, obviously some months ago. And the reason I called it in was because of the impact of the current building within the street scene. As has been said, it's been there approximately 200 years, and I think there were probably other buildings on there of a similar public house prior to that. And I don't wish to get melancholy about the building itself. However, I find that the agent's statement, or the applicant's statement, that they've been advertising it for 7 months and nobody's wanted it. Well, there's been a building site next to it for a year or so taking place. So probably anyone who want to look at it wouldn't want to have it anyway, because there's a building site next to it. I'm also concerned about the possible overdevelopment of this site. It just seems that there's a hell of a lot of dwellings going into this site, and also I'm not swallowing the issue raised again by we've got NHS workers who live in here. It's across the road. I'm not having that either. I think overall, if there was no building there, if the pub wasn't there, I would happily support this application, Chair, although I still think it's crammed in. But I'm afraid that I have to side with the retention of the building. Of course, a building that's been there as long as this, it will get altered, it will get changed over, like loads of buildings do, like houses do, get extensions, etc., etc., etc. There is a lot of merit in this building within the street scene. So I'm finding it very, very difficult to side with the officer's request that we should approve this. Anyway, that's all I wish to say at present. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's very sad that this building, after 200 years, has met the end of its useful life. However, a lot of it has already been altered. I think the homes are very badly needed, and I think that the site is quite sensitively planned, especially maintaining the reclaimed flint. Yes, there's some loss of trees, but again, the mature trees are being maintained, and I think at some point homes for people have to take precedence. I feel for those reasons that I will probably like to support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is around the traffic and the parking. It may meet minimum recommendations, but there's going to be more cars than one per unit, and there's already quite a lot of congestion around the side roads around that area. It's also, I know, a new access is being created, but it goes on to the very fast-flowing Ramsgate Road with a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit, and I just wonder about the safety of that and the safety of people crossing the road, more people sort of using the crossing to get across to the bus stop, which I understand is going to be moved. Can we be told where the bus stop would be moved to? Thank you.
Emma, can you come back on that?
Sorry, I'm just checking that one. To be honest, I wasn't aware that the bus stop was being moved. Let me just check.
That was in a comment from one of the objectors, so it may not be correct, but that was where I read it.
I mean, looking at the photo that I took, there is a bus stop over between the access and what appears to be between the two accesses. So yes, the bus stop does appear to be there. I haven't seen any comments from Highways on the bus stop relocation. I mean, I guess if it was needed, that would take place and Highways would relocate it to a safer position, but they've certainly not objected to the application on any highway safety grounds. The access has been provided with, I think the visibility displays are 91 metres by 2.4 metres, so it's quite long visibility displays from the access point, and therefore they've not raised any objections to that. And also they've had to compare the traffic into the site from the existing pub use and compare that to the proposed flat use. And obviously as a pub use, you could have quite a lot of vehicles as well that would be accessing that. So when comparing the two, they've not considered that there's going to be a significant impact on highway safety from that. But yes, in terms of the bus stop, like I say, I wasn't actually where that was moving, but if it is, then that would just have to happen out through a separate traffic regulation order potentially.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you, Emma. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of comments on what we've heard. One, I concur with Councillor Alban around the crampedness of the houses accommodations being built on what is yet another windfall housing site. We do seem to be building up quite a large number of windfall housing sites, i.e. those not identified in the draft local plan. We're almost going to end up with more unnecessary windfall housing sites than we have in the plan. The other point I wanted to make was around the trees. Yes, it would be good that we're keeping the 5 mature trees, and on that it would be good if we could put a condition on that these are going forward then covered by TPOs, so that if there was a thought going forward, any of the new residents wanted to do unnecessary work and remove them, they weren't going to be able to. And the other point is on condition 27, which relates to the landscaping and mentions that any trees or plants within a period of 5 years from the completion of the development die will be replaced. I'd like it there to be a bit firmer around making sure they don't die and don't need to be replaced, because we have got a very poor track record in Thanet of letting developers get away with planting trees and then just leaving them to die. And there are many like that within my ward. I'm certain of. So I think we need to take this opportunity to make sure that it's not just planting trees; it's looking after them for 5 years and making sure they thrive. So they're my points. Maybe if that condition could be firmed up a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, I'm in favour and against this proposal. I mean, I think it's a shame to lose the orb, as Councillor Orban has said, but I think it's had its day. I am concerned by the fact that it's an overdeveloped site, in my opinion. There's not enough parking. Everybody needs 2 parking spaces who's going to have a place there, because there's no parking anywhere down the side roads for overspill. They're going to sit on the main road then, and I think that's going to be an issue for safety. And I also agree with Councillor Garner about the trees. If they're going to keep the mature trees, they should be TPO'd, and they've got to make sure that if they're working around them, they put surface matting down to make sure they don't damage the roots. Otherwise, they will kill the trees. So I think that's something that needs to be investigated as well before we agree this, to be fair.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Chair. For me, there are 2 main issues with regard to retaining the building. What could this building be used for in the future if it wasn't taken up as a pub again, which is likely? And also the diagonal position of the building means any adjoining development would be very difficult. I would be worried as well that this building would end up as a white elephant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Curry. Councillor Wright.
I agree with. I'm between the devil and the deep blue sea on this one. I realise that we have got a need for more housing. I find it hard to believe that a good architect couldn't incorporate the exterior of the pub and convert it rather than demolish it. To say that it's going to be too much trouble for me isn't an excuse. And if it would also, Emma said that to leave the pub in situ would mean that they'd be compromised with their number of flats. Well, I think leaving it there would be the compromise, because everybody would be happy. We would get some new houses or new flats, but we'd also retain the exterior of a really lovely property.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Coleman-Cook.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. It just seems to me that we got an old building there that has been said by people that it's not viable for financially for conversion. If this does not get approved today, what happens to that building? Left to rot? This we hear people saying constantly, lovely old building. But how long will it be lovely? It's going to rot. People, it's not financially viable for them to go in and convert that. So personally, I think if the locals felt that they didn't want it knocked down, well, they perhaps should have used it a lot more when it was a pub. I personally will be supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bayford, do you wish to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I totally agree with Councillor Curry's comment. The position of the pub across the site would make any building around it very, very difficult. And as for renovating it, if it's going to be changed so much, the old building is lost anyway. I really feel that argument falls flat, and I think that I totally support the officer's recommendation to supply these houses which we so badly need. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick word, having listened to the officers and fellow councillors. I mean, for myself, it's considered a brownfield site. So, I mean, these, in my opinion, should be encouraged, especially over sort of greenfield sites. I can obviously understand and sympathise with people when it comes to obviously retaining heritage, but I mean, we've got to look on sort of economically. If the pub wasn't viable then and it's sat there for 7 months, I mean, when do we sort of give this, how long's a piece of string? What's the acceptable term to leave that as a commercial premises for someone to pick it up 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line? And if no one's going to make use of it, or if anyone's going to sort of inherit it, so to speak, then we just have an empty property. And sooner or later, the new generation will be like, okay, well, why do we have that there? So, yeah, I mean, having weighed this all out, it's certainly a difficult decision, but I've come to my decision and I feel I have to side on the officers with this one. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Garner, you wish to come back again?
Yeah, just quickly, I'm getting back to the trees, but would it be possible for Mr. Livingston or the officer to state that we can put TPO on those mature trees there, please, and beef up condition 27 to make sure all new trees planted are looked after so as they do survive and thrive, please. Thanks.
Now I'll come to Emma, but whether Ian would like to answer that. Emma, do you wish to take that on?
Yeah, I mean, looking at putting a TPO on the trees is certainly something we can look at. I've not had the tree officer actually out on the site to assess the quality of the trees, but that is something we can do because through this proposal, there are obviously more pressure being put on the trees through the development of the site. So that is something we can look at doing. And in terms of the protection of ongoing maintenance of new tree planting, I think that's something our tree officer is aware of. I think he's been to some sites recently that have been developed where trees have been planted and there have been problems. So I think he's very much aware of it and he's keen to make sure that going into the future that we do make sure that sites where there's been tree planting it is maintained and we do make sure it survives.
Thank you, Emma. I can't see any other speakers. If I have missed anybody out, if they could state. No, thank you, members. Okay, I'm going to put this officer's recommendation to you, which is for deferral. As usual, if you could say, when I call your name out, for, against, or abstain. Thank you. Councillor Coleman-Cook.
For.
Councillor Alban.
Against.
Councillor Bayford.
For.
Councillor Curry.
For.
Councillor Duckworth.
For.
Councillor Garner.
I'm abstaining.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Against.
Councillor Keane.
Against.
I don't think we have Councillor Moore. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pat Moore. No, okay. Councillor Roseski.
For.
Councillor Scott.
For.
Councillor Taylor. I'm not sure if he's arrived. No. Councillor Wright.
Abstain.
Myself, I'm for. I will see how Emily's counted up. Thank you, members. That motion has been carried. Thank you for that. Very interesting as well. That concludes public speaking for this meeting. I will now call upon the clerk to read out the remaining planning applications. If a member wishes to reserve an application, will they please call out as she reads? Emily, over to you.
For A.
Yes, please. Councillor Garner.
That's the David Copperfield. For B.
Yes, please.
For C. The David Copperfield Westwood Road, Broadstairs.
No, not 4C.
For D. Land Rear of Pink's Corner Lodge, Bramwell Court, Minster.
Okay.
So that's C and D that haven't been reserved.
Okay. Can I have a proposer to move? These applications are noted.
Proposed.
And a second, please.
I'll second, Chair.
And do you all agree?
Agreed.
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 Thank you. Right. Thank you. Right, moving back to item 4A. I will ask the officer, please, to give the details. This is the David Copperfield.
Thank you, Chair. I will just present my screen.
I can't whistle either.
So the application site is outlined in red. Members will recall we had the application to change the use of this building a few committees ago. This application is for advertisement consent for the erection of a totem sign that is 6.5 metres high to serve the new premises. So as an advertisement consent application, the main considerations are the impact on amenity and also the impact on public safety. So the site is on the aerial image in this area here. So in terms of where the totem sign is to be located, it's to be located between the Newsom McDonald's restaurant and the KFC, directly adjacent to the road. So if you can see the area of parking in this area here, it is the small cross that's located in this area here where the totem sign would be. So this is an image looking at the building as it is now. So where the sort of hedging and small growth is in this area here would be where the totem sign is. You can see if you look further down the road, the remnants of the previous sign that served the David Copperfield, which was in situ. And if I click onto the next image, it will show you it's a little bit clearer. So previously there was a similar sort of totem sign that was sort of further closer to the building, which was 4.5 meters high in that location. Then looking back towards the proposed site, so you can see again the remnants of the David Copperfield harvester sign. And so the totem sign would be around about where this lamppost is here. This is a closer in view showing some of the street furniture that you have at the KFC. So this is an existing sign that's in front of the KFC. And just this is another view of that sign. And then there's also a totem sign that serves Asda, which is on the other corner of the roundabout. So this is the design of the sign. It's, as mentioned, 6.5 meters high. So it's higher than the previous sign that was on the site by a couple of meters. The M is to be illuminated as part of the proposal. The intensity of the light was reduced during the course of the application from 600 candelas per square meter to 400 candelas per meter square. And the report talks about the impact of the illumination on the area. So officers consider that the signage would be in a commercial location and other totem signs are found in the area. And the scale and design is considered to be appropriate given its location. It's not considered to be overly bright following the reduction in the intensity of the light. And therefore, whilst the site is adjoining the green wedge, it is considered appropriate for this sort of part of the suburban landscape, because you do have quite a few sources of light in and around there, including the lights for the car park in Asda, as well as the illumination that you have on the signs of the premises around there. It's not an intrinsically dark landscape, and therefore we don't consider that there is significant harm from the illumination that would be caused, which would just be restricted to the M itself. So overall, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Councillor Garner.
Thank you.
Sorry, I do recommend the officer's recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I called this and the other two on the agenda in at the same time as I called the one that we discussed 4 weeks ago, the main one around around opening the McDonald's restaurant. And while obviously I accept the decision that's been made about the McDonald's restaurant 4 weeks ago, and that's now going ahead. In fact, I know work has started up there already on the construction work. I wanted to make a couple of points on behalf of local residents. I know in the report it's noted that there were no objections raised against this application, when in fact a number of objections were raised relating to the lighting and signage, but they were all logged against the main application, of which there were 17 letters of objection, and then there were also a petition signed by 136 people opposing this, and one of the objections was related to the signage. I'm not really sure that on behalf of those residents that regard has been paid to the surrounding area. This isn't fitting with the local residents. I know 6.5 metres high is quite a lot higher than the previous one, which was 4.5 metres. And I know there's note made that the harvester had planning permission for a 4.5 metre sign, which I don't think actually went ahead in the end. But this is 6.5 metres high, and I do believe that it is out of keeping with the area. And while the building is going to be going ahead, I think this one exacerbates the adverse impact of the character and appearance of the area. So I'm obviously open to persuasion on that, but as it stands, I don't think this 6.5 metre totem pole should be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Orban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a question, really, Chair. I just wanted to know. This does sound rather high, 6.5 metres. Is that do we have any others within the area that are as high as that? Is this common, in other words?
Mr. Lewinson.
Thank you, Chair. So, as mentioned by Councillor Garner and in the report, the signage that was there was 4.5 metres. So that 2015 application, to my understanding, was implemented with regards to again the remnants. And what I would do is I'll just present my screen again just to show you those images. So the image which is looking towards the KFC. So this is the 4.5 metre signage that was in place. You can see the frame of it. So it's 2 metres on top. So it's not as high as the top of the actual lamp that's present there. So it's not the full height. So it's still below the street furniture that's there. In terms of comparables, this is an image that shows the height of the KFC signage. We don't have the precise details of the height of that signage, but you can see that actually that sign is comparable to the actual height of the building itself. If I showed you a different perspective, which is that one, that does not represent how high it is, which is why this is the image that actually shows the two as a perspective. And those that are familiar with the site will also know that is quite a high sign, given that the building itself is almost 1.5 stories in height. So we are pushing closer to 5 metres to 6 metres. So whilst the ASDA sign, if we go to that one, is again, it's that one is higher than the 4.5 metres, but is only just a little bit higher than that. So we are still looking at signs that are around about but not necessarily, certainly not over 6.5 metres. But therefore, the important point is the context to which that sign, the proposed sign, would sit. Because the backdrop of the signage are the buildings themselves, and the height will not exceed the building which is in situ here on the site. Obviously, it's a full 2-storey building. It's not considered that the signage would be dominant in relation to the environment around there. And also, in terms of the width of the sign, for example, it's a relatively unobtrusive design in terms of what it's looked like. It's broken up by the different panels, so it's not going to appear as a singular mass. And the only bit that is illuminated is the top M. So we don't think on that basis that the height in itself would contribute towards, I suppose, a justified refusal. I think there's enough here to suggest that because of the way it's been designed and its location, that it wouldn't result in an obtrusive impact on the character and appearance of the area.
Thank you. Can I come back, Chair?
Yes, Councillor Orban, yes.
Just to say on that, thank you very, very much. On that basis, and on the basis that they've already reduced the illumination of it, I'm quite happy to support this, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, my question was near enough the same as Councillor Orban's, to be honest. My only concern, really, I mean, I understand what Ian's saying, and I do agree with what he's saying to quite an extent. I think the problem we get is that everybody's going to be competing for a taller and taller sign, and then we're going to end up with this situation that you have something that's 20 stories tall that says, "Welcome to Thanet," or whatever it does. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we should have a limit to height, and, you know, we don't want things that are going to take over and show. And I think we have to have an overall decision from the council planning officers as to what the maximum height will be anywhere, so that we have a basis from which to work from. Because I think everybody's just going to say, "Oh, their sign's a bit bigger, I want it to be bigger than them." And I think that needs to be put into place, really, so we don't have this argument.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hart. Councillor Wright.
Mr. Chairman, it's a pity that we haven't got a picture just a little bit further round the roundabout, because I think the biggest impact is the Asda sign. And and compared to some of the older McDonald's illuminations, this actually looks a lot better. So I've got no objections at all. Thank you.
Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, as Ian said, this is a commercial site. The sign is very tall, but it isn't overbearing in design. And personally, I have no objection to this, and I shall support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian, you wanted to come back?
Yes, if I may, Chair. Just about the just with regards to the point that Councillor Hart was making about, you know, the council's view with regards to advertisements. It is something that's usually managed through the policy making side of the planning process. And in years gone by, there was supplementary planning guidance specifically about adverts that was looked at. What we don't have in the district is areas of special advertisement control, which is something that theoretically could come through the plan making process, which restricts down what is permitted without advertisement consent, and that is something that can be looked at. But those elements are looked at through the plan making process, so it would be part of potentially the local plan review if members wanted to raise it through those channels.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Rozeski.
Yeah, just a quick observation. In my travels around the world, I've seen a lot bigger M signs around the place, and this one does seem quite in keeping with the area, as there's KFC and as the signs around. I don't think the 2 meters is that much of a problem. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's a slight slope down there, so I'm not convinced it's going to be that much bigger or taller than the other signs if you even out the landscape. So yes, I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rozeski. I understand that Councillor Moore has just joined us. But on this occasion, I cannot allow Councillor Moore to vote. So there's no other speakers. I put this to the vote once again. For, against, or abstain, and as usual, your names I will call out. Councillor Coleman-Cook.
For.
Councillor Orban.
For.
Councillor Bayford.
For.
Councillor Curry.
For.
Councillor Duckworth.
For.
Councillor Garner.
Against.
Councillor Hart.
For.
Councillor Keane.
For.
Councillor Roseski.
For.
Councillor Scott.
Abstain.
Councillor Taylor isn't with us still. Councillor Wright.
For.
And myself, for. That sounds how it is carried. That motion is carried. Thank you, Emily. Moving on to item 4B, again, the David Copperfield. Could I ask the officer, please, to give the report?
Thank you, Chairman. I will just share my screen. So it is the same site, but this application concerns the proposed fascia signs that are actually situated on the building itself. So there are 5 internally illuminated signs that are proposed on this building. I will just... So the main elevations of the building to look at are this elevation that fronts Westwood Road. Then this is the angled view of that same elevation. And then this is the full-on front view of that. So this building is slightly changing as part of the previously approved application to remove certain elements of it, but you'll see what the facade would look like with the adverts on it. And then it's the other elevation that faces into the sort of car park access area, which is the other entrance to the building, where there are signs that are proposed within this scheme. So the elevation that we were just looking at is the one that faces the right of the image that you're looking at, and then the front elevation is the one, as you can see, that faces the road. So if we look at the front elevation of the building, so what's proposed here are 2 M logos, one above the actual door itself, and then one in the apex of the roof, with some of the McDonald's in the signage that's present on the screen, as you can see. So amendments were sought through this application to reduce the scale of the wording. So if I click to the next slide, you'll see that originally it was proposed with larger writing, and it was a similar application to the previous one in the sense that it was proposed at 600 candelas per metre squared. So as part of this application, the actual size of the wording has decreased and the intensity of the light has also decreased. On the elevation that we saw previously, there is larger signage writing because you're facing into the access road, so it's not considered to cause harm for the primary frontage of the premises, and then a slightly larger M above the other door that's being proposed there. So that's just the other elevation to drive through. So in terms of the detail of those signs, it's a case that the full face of those letters would be illuminated, and then the illumination of the arch itself as well. So overall, it's the same considerations for members. The impact on amenity is the primary consideration. This one follows on from the previous application in the sense that the building previously did have signage on it when it was the Harvester. This signage has been appropriately designed following the amendments in terms of fitting in with the building, so it doesn't dominate the primary and principal elevations of the property. And as outlined in the report, it's considered that the location is appropriate for this type of illumination and this intensity of illumination. Given the fact that the signs have been reduced in size, it's not, in our view, going to have a significant or adverse impact on the landscape from the way that it's been put forward. And so therefore it's recommended for approval.
Thank you, Ian. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Could I have a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Thank you. Councillor Garner, you wanted to speak on this one?
Yes, please. I have similar concerns about these signs I had on the previous one. My particular concerns are on signs 17 and 18, which aren't the ones facing the road, but they're the ones on the side of the roof facing towards Asda, but that will also, of course, when lit up, especially at night, be visible from the residents' houses and gardens that back onto the site. Because you'll probably remember when we discussed and this was approved for the main application 2 meetings ago, we in our wisdom increased the height of a fence between the residents and the McDonald's from 2.4 metres to 3 metres. And now, while that might might help with the odours and the traffic fumes from the queuing traffic to place their orders at the McDonald's, I don't think that's going to help with the visuality of the signs on top of the roof from the residents. And I do believe that this may have an adverse effect on the residential amenity and character of surrounding areas, especially for those local residents who have to either sit in their garden or lay in their bed at night looking out their windows at these glaring through at them. So that's my main concern is around those 2 signs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. I can't see any other speakers, so I'm going to put this to yourselves, members, once again. This is for approval, and again, if you would say for, against, and abstain, I'm grateful. Ian, before we do that, I understand you wish to speak.
Thank you, Chair. So apologies for coming in a little bit late there. Just if it's worth it for the benefit, and just to come back on Councillor Garner's point, just to I hope alleviate some concerns with regards to the impact on neighbours. What we've looked at specifically on this is about the intensity of the light. So the relationship with the neighbouring properties is that the elevation in question with the sort of larger signage is the one that's on the right hand side of the building. So there's no direct views that any of the neighbours have to the signs. It's angled views. They're, in our view, in the context of the overall lighting that's present in the vicinity, but also in terms of the intensity of the light reducing to 400 candelas per metre squared. That is a low intensity, and to give the sort of comparison, that's generally around the same, if not less, than an HD television. So it's not considered that there would be a significant impact from glare to impact on neighbouring properties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. And I hope that answers Councillor Garner. Okay, if we go back to yourselves. As I say, it's officer's recommendation is for approval. Again, I'll go through your names. If you say yes, or for, against, or abstain. Councillor Coleman Cook.
For.
Councillor Orban.
For.
Councillor Bayford.
For.
Councillor Curry.
For.
Councillor Duckworth.
For.
Councillor Garner.
Against.
Councillor Hart.
For.
Councillor Keane.
For.
Councillor Moore, you heard the debate there. If you're there. No, I'll move on. Councillor Roseski.
For.
Councillor Scott.
Abstain.
Councillor Wright.
For.
And myself, for. And I believe that is carried. Thank you, members. Before we close the meeting, members, I slipped up and did it before, unfortunately, but very simple. There was items agreed without debate, which was agenda item 4C. Could I have a proposer that is correct?
Yes.
Proposed.
Second?
Seconded.
Agree.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Well, that concludes this afternoon's planning meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance and comments. Watch out for the thunderstorms, which we're all meant to get. They're always